It's winter. I mean, it isn't, but it was 26 degrees this morning.
Yeah, it is winter. It's not November, but it's December.
But it's November this week, and you can tell.
It's not November, but it's December.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Wait, where even actually are we in this Bible? Here.
Mm-hmm.
So Christ. Yep.
We don't need to keep on doing that explanation that much at the beginning, do we?
I don't think so.
It's
Maybe
the
at this
third or
point we
fourth.
should just say like go back. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey everyone, you're listening to another episode of the Lead Stories podcast, where we believe that everyone has influence.
And when you are intentional with your influence, then you are a leader. I'm Pastor Steph.
And I'm Joe Saxton. Hey everybody.
Thanks for being with us. And hello, I'm going to wave to the people on YouTube. We do have YouTube people, so
yes.
Come see us.
YouTube friends, note this grey cashmere sweater.
It's very nice.
Because you're going to see it a lot.
Because it's freezing in Minnesota.
It's chilly.
Okay, so as we record this, I think today was the first day that there was like frost on my windshield.
That's because it was 26 degrees.
Yep.
And I came back from Phoenix yesterday where it was 85 degrees.
It's honestly a toss-up whether or not you should thaw out as a Minnesotan. Like, should you actually?
Yeah. Is it worth it?
Yeah, there's like pros and cons to the thawing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to Nevada in the end of December, and I think it might be a mistake.
Yeah.
But like a blessed mistake.
Yes.
Then you're gonna come back and it's gonna be that whole thing over again of like, am I sure I will survive?
Yeah.
I will survive. Will all my digits? Not sure.
No. And also, like, you do have to buy your gloves. I'm like, it's always gonna get cold. Why have I taken so long to buy gloves?
They're an investment.
They're an investment.
Boots and gloves.
Oh, boots and coats.
Investment.
And it's not about labels, it's about living.
Yeah.
About survival.
It's about survival mentality. Now, I think, it's very Minnesotan to talk about the weather like we are.
And English.
So
now it's just kind of mutated.
It's a great thing, yeah. And I actually do think that people are curious, though, because it is one of the things that people ask me the most if they're not from Minnesota.
Yeah.
Like, oh, neat. So, being alive in the winter.
How do you do it? Is it really that cold?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
Yeah. How long does it last?
A long time. Too long.
Time.
The answer to that is always too long.
Always too long.
So
by about 3 months.
Yeah, exactly. So people who do also live in cold weather climates. Solidarity, like take your vitamin D, my friends, and do what you need to do to stay emotionally healthy. Get a gym membership. Not for like the muscles, for like
getting out,
for going into and for being able to go into a bright space.
Yeah,
like honestly, that's what I like my gym for the most is because it's pitch black out. It's 8 a.m.
Yeah,
and it feels bright in there, so it's like
cheers you up and everything.
I might actually work out, but I mostly just need some brightness.
I'm just gonna stand around chatting to other people who've turned up for the light.
Woo! Anyway, we've now 2 minutes. We've now given 2.5 minutes to the weather.
And it's probably time to move on.
We won't do that again for at least a few weeks.
or perhaps next time. Maybe.
We're in a really fun series, I feel like.
It is.
I think this has been something that's influenced both of us for a long time, but it's really fun to bring it to the podcast.
Yeah, I think that we have, I think in our culture at large, there are particular kind of personality assessments and ways of looking at your gifts and skills that kind of are the one of the day. Mm-hmm. And I think this probably was the one of the day a while ago.
Right. In Christian context.
In Christian contexts. I mean, and because it's directly taken from the Bible, it's not like it's a new thing at all, but it's just nice to revisit.
Yeah, and I find it to be something that has continued to be important for me in understanding myself as a leader, but even more so in understanding how to continue to build a team. It's been huge. I found myself saying, even in the last few weeks, I'm really bought into this Ephesians 4 gifting thing. like just saying that, because what I'm trying to say is that teams are so crucial because we can't all have all the gifts.
Well, it's a wonderful reminder, isn't it? It's a wonderful reminder for those of us who are perfectionists and call it walking in excellence or something like that, that we can't be all the things.
No.
And we were never designed to be. And I think it reminds us that we don't need to feel like failures on account of our wiring.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And it's a good reminder of the whole Lone Ranger solo superstar thing is not how we're even designed to function.
No.
It's not how we're designed to lead. and designed to be. So as we're thinking of our teams, and again, the other thing it reminds me of is that it's really wise not to recruit in your own image. Do you know what I mean?
That's crucial.
And we do have a tendency as leaders, whether it's in the church, whether it's in the workplace, wherever our sphere of influence is, that we often recruit and invest in our own image. Someone who's like us, skilled like us, but actually we do need to think broader, and it's great to see in the Bible this illustration, this picture of how God has poured out his gifts that reminds us of the beauty and the benefits of a broad, diverse team.
Absolutely, because it's not about optics or about some sort of like checking the boxes of, oh, I've invested in someone younger or older or this generation or this perspective or this background or this ethnicity. No. There's actually just such a great biblical precedent for the entire mission will be better if you have a diverse team who brings different gifts and skills and perspectives. It's not about what's catchy or what's
no, the data's
popular.
Just catching up with what was already there.
Totally. And I find that about Scripture. When you read it in context and you do the hard work of understanding it in context, I think you see that we're catching up. Psychology and some of these studies, which I love integrating that stuff, is catching up to these realities that we're seeing kind of laid out here for the early church. And look, they were pretty confused about it then. We're pretty still confused about it now. We're doing the best we can. But for me, so here's one point of clarity as we talk about these 5 gifts. And please, if this is your first episode, listen to the first 5 minutes of the last one or something so that you get the overview of what the 5-fold gifts are. And then 5foldsurvey.com is a place where you can take a little survey to see what your top gifts are. But I think just to say to people, are there times in our leadership where we need to do all 5 functions? Yes. That's different than all 5 of them being your natural gifting, in which case you try to be all those things as your natural gifting and you're going to get burned out.
Oh, absolutely.
Having to step into those phases is totally real. I would say that shepherding is one of my lowest ones. That's unfortunate, since oftentimes we use the word pastor for that, and that is my title, and that's confusing. But it doesn't mean that I don't do shepherding work. It means that I need to make sure there's people on my team where shepherding is their heart and their passion and their primary gift, so that when I do it, it's not out of a sense of I need to do it, but I'm stepping into it willingly and sustainably. Because if my whole job was shepherding for a long period of time, that's not sustainable. For a short period of time, a lot of shepherding, sure. For a moment in a week or part of a day or part of a week, sure. I can't live from that place though, because it's not who I am. So that's the difference. Because I don't want people to say I came up with these 2 at the bottom, so I don't have to do that.
I'm out.
I don't have to do that.
I don't have to care. No, that's not
what we're saying.
That's not what we're saying.
Let's talk for a minute. So on Lead Stories Community, we have
on our Facebook group,
Lead Stories Community. Anybody's welcome to join. Just search Lead Stories Community. We'll let you in unless you have. I was trying to think of something snarky to say about their Facebook profile.
No, unless you are abusive and toxic and mean and cruel and vindictive.
Unless
maybe that's not the environment for you.
No. But it's great because we have some conversations there. And people are sharing their results from 5foldsurvey.com, and I would love for people to do that if they feel willing. And what I've noticed there, and then also in any context that you and I have done this in, sometimes people end up with results that seem like they're relatively balanced.
Yes, like even.
Yeah, so if you were doing
scores in every area.
If you were doing a mentoring moment with somebody and they told you that, how would you respond?
There'd be a couple of things I would ask. First of all, I would ask how they approach surveys.
Yeah, right.
Do you know what I mean? I think there is a thing of when you approach a survey, if you're feeling like you've got to be like the best person, then that may impact what your results are. It's
not a psychological test, it's a survey. So you're the one putting forward how you understand yourself.
Totally. And what we're looking for is a snapshot of where you're at right now, not an aspirational sense of who you're supposed to be. You know, do you know what I mean? Because for this to be useful and for this to be productive, we're just trying to get a snapshot. So I often ask people, look, how long did you ponder these questions?
Right.
Or did you just kind of quick fire answer? Because sometimes for some of us it's more helpful to quick fire answer and just get it out before our oughts and shoulds starts coming in. I've noticed when people are very even that the oughts and shoulds can be quite loud for us at times. It can be there could be a number of things. Either we have not had a chance, the opportunity to really hone a gift, so we've had to be generalists. If you're in a church setting where it's a small church and they're all hands on deck all the time, you probably had to do all of those things. So I'd probably ask a bit more about your context. Have you been involved in a church plant recently?
Yeah.
Where everybody's had to do all the things all the time?
Yep.
Has life or your context forced you into doing general things? And then I'd ask more, because this is a snapshot and not a complete assessment of your entire identity, we'd have ongoing conversations. And then I would ask, do you feel like you have to be it all, do it all the time? What about you? What things would you?
I think I would say some of those same things. And I think what you said about like a church plant, any startup, any place where there's more to do than there are people, and that phrase, all hands on deck, or like other duties as assigned, and people joking about that. Like that's real, and it's not exclusive to church settings. I mean, it's just real.
It's just real in startup life, isn't it?
Yeah, and then I think the next thing I would say to both men and women, there's gender constructs that might push us towards some of these roles. Yeah. So for lots of men that I've spoken to, they might feel as though shepherding is really a place that they come from naturally, but they feel the pressure to be apostolic or to be a teacher. Yeah. And to be a really good teacher and a really good preacher, and it's not that they don't need to do that. They do, like we said earlier. Yeah. But they also need to tend to who they naturally are wired as. And so similar for women, the construct is often to be more shepherding, to be more of a, someone who can come alongside or even the evangelist we talked about, like being the person that gathers. The women do that. Sure, there's so many women that are so gifted at that, but that doesn't mean all the women are gifted at that.
Yeah, and sometimes I think with a survey, when we do a survey like this and we look at the scale, look at the different gifts, I sometimes ask people what their close second is. Yeah, as well, because sometimes that might not just indicate the phase they're in, it might indicate what they'd like to be or what they actually are. Yeah, right. But because they're a teacher, the teacher thing will always come strong, because that's the skill set professionally that they're living with, and that they're functioning, or they're a nurse, and so inevitably they're going to answer those questions that lean towards the caring profession, their caring profession and their skill set in a particular way. But you might see something else there.
Yep, I think I would actually tell somebody to go back and take the test again, and to think about answering the questions around things that feel, the phrase I would use is life-giving. Ooh, that's so good. Do I find myself doing this? Sure. Do I feel it's life-giving for me to give my time to this? Then don't give it as high of a score. Yeah. So, or give it a no. And it's just a survey. No one's seen the results. So just go back and answer it as though this is what I would love to do with my day, my vocational day. Yeah. And just say yes to the things that you would feel the most energized to do.
That would be fascinating, actually.
And don't feel like you're saying, no, I hate spending time with people in a shepherding way when you say no. You're just saying that that's not the thing that gives me the most energy in life.
That's interesting, actually, because if I know in the early days when I used to do this, I would kind of second guess myself in terms of the things I'd say yes to, and then I'd be like, well, that doesn't mean I hate people. Right. Well, that doesn't mean I'm like, no, don't have a conversation with the survey. Right. You know?
It's just between you and the survey anyway.
You don't have to. Feel released from having to talk back to the survey and explain that you are a nice person, really. Yeah. And things.
Totally. So, okay, so we're going to talk today about the apostle. Yeah. And I think it's time to let the cat out of the bag, because we often say that people have kind of the top two that they really live out of. And I think, unless I'm mistaken, you and I both have apostle and prophet as our top two. Yes. And we understand that that's giving a narrow perspective, because we've been sharing about all five. We intentionally did the three that aren't us first. Yeah. And now that I'm saying this, I think we should figure out, either in this season or another one, to have a panel.
Oh, we should do interviews with people with each one.
Yeah, or have like a group of people, how they would, all five gifts would have respond differently. Yeah. So we can maybe find three other people that represent the other three. So we'll think about that.
We'll work on that, friends.
Yeah, but we've spent but in our defense, we've spent a lot of time. We've spent a lot of time
before you throw your smart device across the room
and be like, these guys only have a narrow perspective. Yes, we bring diverse perspectives in a lot of ways, but this is not one of them. So, but we do bring a lot of experience with a lot of different leaders, both men and women, church leaders, and people working in different contexts outside of quote unquote church. So we're trying to represent it that way, but I do believe there's value in hearing from the source. And so we will consider that too. So you'll notice as we talk about this, there'll be a little bit more of our own, how I see myself in this. Yeah. Of course it would make the most sense to give you our perspective as experiencing it, just like it would be helpful if we bring some other people in on that. Cool. As well. But we're giving the framework first, which is what these first 5 weeks are. So, yeah. So, I shouldn't make promises about what we're doing on the recording, but I did.
We try.
I think it would be
good. We try.
So anyway, the apostle. How would you describe the apostle? And then I'll give my little framework after that.
Okay. I'm going to give the most basic definition first of all. That the word apostle comes from the word apostolos, and it literally means one who is sent or one who is sent off. It comes from the verb which means to send off.
Yep.
So often you'll see it translated as an ambassador, an envoy as well. Often they are translated as a messenger, someone who goes to another context to bring a word or to bring a message, and that message is an embodied one.
Their physical presence is bringing that
Exactly.
as going towards a place.
Whenever I'm thinking of the understanding of the apostle, there tends to be a pioneering aspect to it.
Yeah.
Because that's what we see exemplified in the New Testament, that the apostles were these sent ones who went out to establish a work, establish the gospel in different contexts. I'm trying to think of other things. There are lots of things. When I've heard other people describe it, let me come back to a couple of definitions. Some have been described, they describe them as pioneers, as church planters. Entrepreneurial, as people who kind of set things up for others to thrive in. I think that's the most, if I'm breaking down the language, I was going to say talk about building things and bridging things, but they're often bridging different contexts.
Right.
Taking this message from one context to another.
They're bridging from where we are to where we could be.
Yeah, where we could be.
Yeah.
And that's not just this is where you're going into the future, but just this is another way of doing something.
Right.
Or this is to reach a different kind of community or in a different way. They're often seeing, and in some ways, it's not surprising that they often work alongside the prophets, who we'll talk about next time, because they often see things that aren't there, that don't exist, but they're often very pragmatic as well and do what it takes to get it set up there.
Yeah. So there's actually two frameworks that come to mind, or maybe the right word is like an illustration.
Yeah.
So the first one actually connects really well to frigid Minnesota winters. Okay.
Oh, okay.
And
we're on a theme.
I'm gonna just say up front that I'm really uncomfortable in a lot of ways talking about the American story of pioneers and settlers.
Awkward.
Because it's awkward in a lot of ways. However, we are sitting here now because of this reality. Mm-hmm. And so what happened when you think about Minnesota winters, the reason someone made it this far west, that's funny that we call this the Midwest because it doesn't feel west to me now, right?
Yeah.
But it was at one point the West, right, of the way that these Europeans were seeing it. And so the reason that we didn't just blow through here and say, yikes, it's freezing, keep going, is because, well, the reason there was people who explored to here were pioneers, were probably people who had that impetus to be apostles, to go to the next place, and maybe these other gifts. But if it wasn't for the shepherding types and the teaching types, there wouldn't have been a settlement. People would have been like, yikes, it's freezing, keep going. But the people that settle figure out, okay, if we can live here, how do we do it? And then, now it's evolved to mittens, gloves, boots, and coats. Mm-hmm. But there's ways in which people say, I think we can figure out how to settle here. But to be completely honest, like a lot of people died. Yeah. Trying to figure out how to navigate the Midwest and then onto the mountains and all that kind of stuff. So I find that to be like slightly helpful way to think about it, but then it just gets into like creepy manifest destiny stuff, and I don't think we should go there. So let's give
brutality.
But
anyway,
so let's go to like just a different framework, and this one won't resonate with everybody either. But in Minnesota and in a lot of places, Colorado and other places, camping is a very common thing. Mm-hmm. I personally don't totally understand why you'd want to go put a tiny piece of material between you and the forest, but that is what a lot of people do.
Yeah, apparently it's fun.
So I would like everyone to imagine that they think it's fun to go camping. And you're going camping with your 5 friends. Ooh. Yeah, you see where I'm going to go with this? And I can't remember who first gave me this illustration, but it definitely is not something I made up. And it's just a framework. So you've got your 5 friends, and you've got the friend who says, all right, we've arrived. I think this is where the campsite should be. Let me explore the area and find the exact right spot for us to lay down the camp. So the first friend goes runching off into the forest to find the right spot for them to lay the camp. Yeah. There's another friend that says, okay, while you're doing that, I'm going to gather wood for the fire, because as soon as we camp, we're going to want to sit down, we're going to get as much wood as possible because we're going to have a fire, and the best campfire's got a lot of logs and it's going to be great. And then you've got the third friend who says, okay, I see what we're doing here, but I also think that we need to make sure that wherever we settle is comfortable and it's not too rocky. And so I'm going to make sure that this first friend knows that this is a good spot. And then they find the spot, and that person comes in. And so then you imagine the friends are getting together and they sit around a campfire, they pitch the tent, and they're getting ready to sit around the fire for the evening. And the one friend's going, look at all these logs that I brought together. And then the next friend says, this is great, but have you noticed some of these logs are falling out of the fire? Let's make sure they stay warm and stay connected to the fire.
Oh
they might be falling out. Let's just make
That's
sure
so
they're
funny.
there. And then you've got another friend that says, if you're all really lucky that I brought some kindling, some newspaper, because it's off of this. Like, let me explain to you how to keep the fire going. If so I brought this newspaper and I've got these things because this is going to really keep this fire going. Is this? And then you've got this fifth friend who has this stick that they found in the woods, and you're like, what are they going to do with this stick? And every once in a while, they just poke the fire. And then the embers fly,
Yeah.
And everybody thinks that's maybe like a little bit annoying, but the reality is that fire needs oxygen to stay in the midst of it, or it's not going to stay strong, and so it'll keep burning. And so these five friends, they have their campfire and they have their evening, and that's the end of the illustration. So who are the five friends? The person that goes out to find the place to settle is the apostle. So we have only covered the other three, so we'll cover prophet next time. But the apostle is the one that goes out and says, where's the best place to put this camp down?
Yeah.
But the shepherds are the friend that's concerned that the camp is in a good spot, right? Is
Yeah.
it good? Is it on rocky ground? Are we near water? They're making sure that people are cared for
Details.
and that the details are there for the sake of everyone who's together. The shepherd is also the person that's going to be noticing if any logs fall out of the fire, because we need to keep them together. Because if a log falls out of the fire, the flame's going to go out. Keep them together. The teacher is the person who says, I know how to, let me explain, let me
How it
teach you
needs
how
to be
you do
done,
this.
yeah.
I know how to be done. And I like thinking of them as bringing the kindling, because I do think that understanding is something that does help us keep a flame.
Yes.
And when you don't feel like you have understanding and you need to be explained something, that the passion can go out, because misunderstanding is really hard for people.
Yeah.
And so there is a
Good.
sense of process
Good.
and explaining. And so then you've got the evangelist, who's the one that's like, let's go get the logs and let's all make sure we have enough firewood. And we should have made sure more people were invited on this trip. Next time, let's invite everybody.
Next time,
Let's
Yeah,
get
so
more
funny.
people.
That's
You
so
know
funny.
who would love this trip.
Yeah.
And then finally, the prophet represents this person who gets the poking stick.
He pokes the
And
fire.
we'll talk about the prophet next time, but the prophet is the one who, at their best day, we'll talk about what they're doing, but what they're doing is making sure that everybody's thinking about what God cares about and what's right and what's good. And I see that as the oxygen in the fire.
Yeah.
Like keeping the Holy
Keeps it
Spirit
alive.
in there
Keeps
and
it
giving
alive.
it life. But embers and when you
got
stoke
sparks.
the fire, sparks fly
There are
out,
sparks.
and it feels a little dangerous.
And it's still poking a fire.
And it's poking. And if somebody's not careful, they will destroy the fire.
yeah.
They will poke it so that the logs fall apart and the fire goes out, or
That's good.
that the flame does skip and it catches a wildfire, and you don't want it to. And so that framework, some people are like, okay, that just made me more confused. But I do know some people like that, an illustration like that helps
Yeah.
them. So I wanted to offer that. If you're in the 4th out of 5, I think you can start to get your head around it. I'm just saying, okay, so the illustration of the camping trip is to help see how, with all 5 gifts, you're going to have things that each person brings that would be distinctly missing without all 5 of
Yeah.
them. And so the apostle, here's the problem: if the apostle does not have the other 4, is that they'll be out there camping by themselves.
Yeah.
Like they'll be out ahead. They'll be picking campsites that aren't best for other people, and they need other people to help them determine where to go. And the apostle sometimes goes out and finds a spot and then comes back and says,
Yeah.
"Hey, come with me."
Hey, come with me.
And I think we see that a lot, whether it's in the church or seeing entrepreneurs. They're not that afraid to try things that might not work, because then they'll try something else. You see these idea of serial entrepreneurs. They're going to try something and they're going to say, how did this go? And then if it doesn't go well, they're going to go, let's try something else. If it does go well, they're going to start finding those evangelists, finding those shepherds
gathering
and
people
teachers
with
and
them.
gathering
Go
the
get it
people
set
with
up.
them. Yeah, so that's an illustration I just offer for just to take the conversation a little bit deeper.
I think you touch on a couple of things there when you describe it in the wider world, as it were. Because I think otherwise we'll be like, well, I'm not planting a church, so I'm not starting a denomination or starting a movement as such, so this doesn't apply to me. But actually, where you see startups, you see someone who is seeking to set up something new. Where you see people starting something new, somewhere along the line, that's a kind of another illustration of that kind of thing.
Yeah, or as people, and I know a lot of people listening to this don't have vocational roles in churches, and that's wonderful. You're called and gifted for what you're doing. But in your local church, if you have this kind of entrepreneurial said
innovative
about you. Yeah.
vibe about you.
Go try some stuff in your neighborhood. Do you need your pastor's permission to see maybe what God might be doing amongst the refugees in your neighborhood? Do you need your pastor's permission to go volunteer at a food shelf and see what's happening there? To explore? No, you don't. And honestly, most church leaders are going to be interested in people having experimented and coming back and saying what it was like. So go and try stuff. Go see. Bring a couple people with you.
I think we also historically, and I'll talk about the West, but historically in the West, church-wise, we've often seen the pioneering types end up in parachurch.
Yes.
Organizations.
So the prophets, evangelists, and the apostles, or the often people say the apostles, the prophets, and the evangelists, or the APE, they get kind of, it's not kicked out. I don't think so. I think it's like, you know what, you'd be best used over here. It's this kind of, passive aggressive at best and aggressive at worst. But this idea of like, this is ruffling too many feathers, it's too much, and so why don't you go over here? But the local church needs all the gifts. That's the rub in a way. Yeah.
I think there's an inevitable rhythm for the pioneering type where you go somewhere and you try something new and then you come back and share what's happening. Mm-hmm. Or you establish an outpost of what's already been happening in your context in another place.
And every apostle has to think about if there's times where out of mutual submission you submit to the settlers who are saying we need to just wait a little bit, or could you go and explore that and we'll come with you after we have a little sit down and lunch. If you think about it, and there's times I think when apostles need to heed that, and other times when they need to disrupt it.
Oh, disruptors. I'm just thinking of the I'm thinking of the language of the day.
The language of the day is
definitely
disruptors.
And how this kind of contextualizes itself in the language of the day. That if God has wired people, where will we expect to find these people? We know where we'd expect to find teachers. We know where we'd expect to find evangelists. And I think one of the places we'd expect to find people who are apostolic would be in those startup environments or those disruptive innovators within an established context or institution in some way.
Most organizations and institutions would prefer like blueprints and strategic plans. Mm-hmm. And I understand that.
Yeah, well, naturally.
But how do you get blueprints for, let's use an example like the airplane. Well, the blueprint for the airplane was not designed and then they built an airplane. Yeah. There was building a bunch of planes and things that they were trying to make fly, and once they started to find what works, they started to write the blueprint down. There's got to be the people that go out and figure out some stuff before it can really be written down or put into a blueprint or into something that can be reproduced. There's got to be people who build the plane while they're taking off. Yeah. And it's frustrating for a lot of people because they want to say, wait. We need a blueprint. We need a map. We need a strategic plan before we go down this road. And I understand that. And there is some wisdom to that with large groups of people going down roads without. But the apostles, the prophets, the entrepreneurs need the space to go out and see. And then they can come back and say, now come and see. But that's needed. How did we get anywhere without the people who said, I don't know what we're building. I'm going to start building something. And then we're going to organize it afterwards. Yeah. And then
this just needs to be done.
And what's the purpose of organizing? So that more people can participate, which is great. But you can't organize something that doesn't exist. Honestly, people are always trying to organize before something exists.
Yeah. And instead of how's it going to be and how's this going to get established. And it's like, well, we don't know because we've not done it yet.
It doesn't mean you don't have a business plan or a vision or a thought, but you have to be flexible, or another word that's really popular right now that's I think a helpful word, which is being agile. Yeah. Like having agility to be able to say, okay, well, we thought we were doing this, but we're going to try this. Leadership agility, the best definition would be doing a series of experiments and learning quickly from those experiments that you can apply then to the next challenge. And quickly respond.
There's a lightweightness that's required, though, isn't there?
Absolutely.
I was thinking, as you were describing that, and you're talking in the business world, I started thinking of the church context again, and thinking of Paul's journey in the New Testament, and him being a sent one, a representative, him being an envoy, an ambassador, and this team, the Priscilla and Aquilas and others who are doing this stuff with him, or Junior or others who are working alongside him, and thinking, oh, it didn't work there. We're going to go somewhere else, and go and plant, and again, see and go as a messenger, go and extend the gospel in another context, in another way. But you can't have ties too deep, if you're going to be able to do that well. Or them setting up a place in Antioch, which is this diverse leadership team, multi-ethnic, multi-socioeconomic group of people who are worshiping and praying together, and it's like, okay, time to send them to another place. You're like, but this was ideal.
Yep.
You know what I mean? This is still being replicated, and people are still trying to work it out 2,000 years later. Why don't you stay there?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
And it's not for everyone. It's not for everyone to be the apostle.
Yeah.
And the people who feel the pressure to be that when that's not them, that's really hard.
That's challenging.
But it's also hard to be those people in a space where there's not permission to go out and see.
Well, I think as well, I think the challenge with pioneering things, and I'm not, the challenge with whether you're pioneering something in your family, in your workplace, in your community, it's hard to describe something that no one can see, touch, feel. I love listening to How I Built This,
Podcast,
the podcast, which talk about the stories of entrepreneurs and the things they built, et cetera, and the ideas that they had, and them trying to explain to someone what it was,
right?
And trying to explain to an investor who they're asking for money from,
right?
On invest in this idea, invest in this thing that we haven't, you know what I mean, or
doesn't exist,
this thing that doesn't exist yet, or something that, because they're agile, because they're holding something lightly, discover along the way, well, that was what we were trying to do. This is actually the thing we ended up
almost
building.
every story is like that.
But I think it's worth us observing, rather than just the challenge of that, the gift that is.
Right.
Because these are gifts. But I think to those of us who have other gifts, we might be looking and thinking, that feels like a threat.
Right.
And that's true of all of them.
And sometimes disrupting, it is a threat to what is considered stable
safe.
Or seems stable or safe.
And I mean, do you know what I mean? I just think it's something worth us pondering. If we are wired this way, if God has wired us this way, or if we are working with people on teams who are this way, to pay attention to what we find threatening in that. For those of us who are wired this way, are you running at a pace that other people can keep up?
Yeah.
Because if you're running off into the distance and you don't have a team, it doesn't matter how invincible you feel you are, it's not going to happen.
Right.
It's not, and if it does, it's not going to be sustained because you've alienated all your relationships along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we at some point should share more about what this is like for us, like we were saying earlier. But one thing I'll say for me, because I have such an apostolic or entrepreneurial bent, I really do value rootedness and consistency as well. But that means I have to be really intentional about it. And so for me, just the way that it works for me, I see my church as a place where I have a lot of rootedness and a lot of investment in that part of life. And so I need to have other entrepreneurial things going on in other spaces. I've said before, if all of my and do I give some of my apostolic energy to my church? Oh, totally. But I've said before, if all of my apostolic energy was coming at Mill City, that would be exhausting for them and for me. It's not best for that context. And so for me, I've had to figure out if I want to have this rootedness here that I feel called to at this time, then I need to think about how I use that energy in ways that God's calling me to that aren't all driving it at one place. So if you're finding, if as an apostle you're finding the people around you are weary of it, it might be that all of it's going at your family or your church or your team.
Maybe your family don't want to move every year.
Whatever it is, right.
There are other ways to scale your adventure.
Exactly, and so it's really about managing it. So I that's just one thing that I know that I would share more about if we were to talk about our own. But what would you say? Is there anything you want to say, and then about your apostolic nature, and then what would you say to people apostles who are saying, okay, I think this might be me? Some encouragement for them and maybe some warnings.
I think one of the ways in terms of as a gifting, I often look for what's missing. I think and I'm just reflecting now, looking back and thinking, what isn't there? Because that's what I want to do. And it's not necessarily an ego thing. I'm sure at times it's been an ego thing.
But that's not the main motivation.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not. But what I'm saying is what's missing, because if something's missing or who's missing, then it's incomplete. And then we're not going to be as effective as we all seek to be. And I'm like, people are laying down their lives for this. We need to make sure we've got all the people on deck that we need to get things going. So I think that's been my default position every time. Who's not in the room, who's not being skilled and equipped and empowered to thrive in the way that they're designed to. And because it's already costing us. It's already costing us in ways that we don't know. And I think for me it speaks to the sense of being sent somewhere. I think I would say to people who are like, oh, I think I'm wired in a way where I'm, the startup person, the serial entrepreneur. I would say trailblazing looks real exciting from a distance, but we don't always think of the scars when you are going on, because what we're talking about is people who are sent to uncharted territory.
Right, you don't know what's on the other side.
There's not a road.
Right.
There's not a path. You are creating said path.
Yeah.
You are laying foundations, and you actually might not get may not get the credit for that. It may be the person who comes and sets stuff up afterwards, and establishes the work.
Yeah.
That actually gets the credit for the work that's been built. Mm-hmm. And that fact, people don't often see foundations; they just see buildings, and you may not be the one who builds the building. Right? Do you know what I mean? You might develop the people who then build the systems or whatever. But I would say trailblazing is a costly work, is a time-consuming work, is a demanding work. It has its own. I keep on having that picture of a road being paved, and all the stuff it churns up in the process. I would say pioneering work does that. When you are looking at what's missing, when you're trying something new, it disrupts everything in your relationships, in your rhythms, because nothing's been set up yet.
Right.
And some of us find ourselves pioneering uncharted paths by force. There's a change in our family. You never expected to go back to work. You never expected to, you didn't plan to lose a spouse at this stage. You didn't plan to lose a spouse, period. Do you know what I mean? You didn't.
You planned to have one by then.
Yeah, you planned
to have one by this time.
And so I think I'm always reminded of the uncharted territory sounds way more exciting than it is.
Yeah.
But actually, you are digging sometimes with your bare hands. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of these entrepreneurs who are like, how did you get that person? Well, I showed up at their office every day. They wouldn't give me an appointment, so I sat outside the door.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So therefore, it's vulnerable, it's raw, it's hard work to do that. It's not glamorous. It may feel exciting later when the path has been blazed and you have set things out and people are walking along it. But that's the end of the work.
Right.
The beginning of the work is. When I think of pioneers, I've been thinking a lot in recent years about my family and them moving countries. Mm-hmm. And probably because of me moving countries, I think about this and thinking.
But you're thinking about your family coming to England.
Oh yeah, I think about Nigerian family coming to England.
Yeah.
And thinking them turning up and thinking everything is different. Everything is different. The climate is different, the cultural mores are different, the reception is different, the expectations are different, and then having to forge a pathway forward in an unknown space because they think ultimately this is the right place for us to be, and this is what we want for the future generations. This is where we at least want them to have access to, even if we don't know if we're going to stay here forever. We want them to have the benefits of at the very minimum the work we put into this place. But it's a costly thing.
Yeah, counting the cost.
I think you've got to count the cost. And I would say to those of us who are entrepreneurs and those of us who are doing startups, planting churches, count the cost. But for those of us who are finding themselves pioneering in unexpected ways, that the reason why it may be exhausting you is because it's a costly work. And so to give yourself some grace on that.
Yeah, that's really important. And it costs something for other people. Yeah. So you were saying, like, you get to the place and everyone's going, wow, look what we did. And other people are going, yay, and I'm still limping.
Yeah.
That's that so because back there, like I twisted my ankle, but we had to keep going. Yeah. And we didn't get to stop for more than a second to put some ice on it, And I think that's a really acute experience for some people. Yeah. Honestly, it's why a lot of startups, the first staff, the first team, or a lot of church plants, the first core team, there's some changeover within the first few years. And it's not always because the people are like, I'm out of here. It's just because they gave what they were called to at that time, and then they need to say, like, I gotta go, so I gotta move on, or I gotta go to a place that's settled. And
they may not have the skills to do that next part of their development.
Exactly.
Because because their lens through which they see those things are this uncharted territory. Well, what do you do when it's charted?
Honestly, I mean,
you can overstay your welcome when it's charted.
That's another reason that I am always like, I really, when it comes to leadership, the fivefold, like, because if you don't have don't have leaders that bring all the gifts, then when it's time for the shepherds and teachers to step up, where are they? Yeah. And then you end up with founder syndrome and other things that come from the entrepreneurial people who can't let it go. And I get that. So I get that. I get how hard that is. The amount of things that I've let go of now in my church because the shepherds and the teachers and the evangelists need to do it is a lot. And it's hard. It's still hard. But I know that this process of letting it go and giving it to the people with the other gifting is best.
Yeah.
And it's messy, and we're not sure all the time. And do I need to be at that? Is it okay if I'm not there? Is me being there messing it up? Like, it's just like a constant question. But what it does is it frees up the gifts that I have to do other things for our community.
Yeah.
That doesn't then just hold us back because I think I got to use this thing that started as nothing and now is a thing needs my same skill set. That doesn't make sense. Of course it needs a different skill set.
Absolutely.
And do your skills grow with it? Sure. But then there is a limit to that. There's a limit to that.
There is a maturing by having to do something differently.
Yeah.
There is a maturing that comes from having to do, like for those of us who are more shepherding and who tend to be the ones who want to develop a work on or develop something over a long period of time, we grow in those pioneering moments if we let ourselves.
Right.
And similarly for those who are pioneering, where we have to put roots down and establish in a way and not have a vision every month.
Right.
And a new uncharted piece of territory to explore every month. We grow in the putting the roots down deep, but we are how we are.
Yeah. Team. Great. Well, this is fun. So we have only one more.
One more.
And then we will bring it to you next week. But once again, you can go to the show notes. You'll see some places. We've got a lot of friends who've written on this and talk about this.
Yes, and we encourage. This is more the springboard into further.
Yeah. Neither of us are going to go like, waist deep or neck deep on this.
No.
We're just saying, hey, this has been really helpful for us and a tool, and we have done some deep dives, and so now we're encouraging you to do that. We're not the deep end of the pool on it. We are the people who say, maybe you should jump into that.
We're making introductions.
Yeah.
We're making introductions.
It's fun. Cool.
All right.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next week, and we'll hit the fifth of the
And
five.
final.
The fifth and final. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye. I need the bathroom really badly. So I've got to go.